Hey guys, tonight we step into the arid heart of a desert you can almost taste through the warm hum of your room, tracing the footprints of traders whose caravans once wove like golden threads across endless sand. You trudge along a sun-blanched trail, grains whispering beneath your sandals, and already you sense the kind of danger that only 1001 Nights' tale can deliver. You probably won't survive this. Well, not in the literal sense, but your imagination is about to take a beating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time, because somewhere in the world, someone's stepping into this same story at the exact moment you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The desert stretches endlessly, a golden ocean under a sky so pale you almost forget it's blue. Heat shimmers off the dunes like invisible phantoms, teasing your eyes with mirages that promise oasis, treasure, or doom. You adjust the strap of your satchel, feeling the coarse fabric bite against your skin, and notice a lone figure in the distance, a trader, draped in deep ochre robes, riding a camel with the patience of centuries. You approach, drawn by the faint scent of spice and sandalwood that clings to him, and immediately your senses are assaulted by the world's harsh textures. Dry wind whipping sand across your face, sunburn threatening every exposed inch of skin, the subtle ache in your legs from a journey you haven't even begun in earnest. Historians still argue whether such traders ever covered hundreds of miles in a single day, or relied more on storytelling to sell the allure of speed. You glance down at the ground, noticing the occasional coin half buried in the sand, glinting like a siren's wink. Maybe it fell from someone who dared chase the desert too far, or perhaps it's a token left intentionally. Desert superstition often mingled luck with the mundane. Fringe scholars have suggested some of these coins were enchanted with protective symbols, though that's still up for debate. You reach the trader, and his eyes meet yours, sharper than any blade, warmer than any hearth. "Looking for fire?" he asks, almost casually, though you sense it's the kind of fire that doesn't burn your hands, but your very curiosity. He unrolls a faded, intricate map, its edges curling like desert snakes, showing paths you can barely imagine traversing. The map glimmers faintly, as if aware that it has a new companion. You run your fingers across its surface, feeling raised ink, tiny bumps where symbols suggest hidden dangers or rewards. It smells faintly of smoke and saffron, a curious combination that makes your stomach lurch and your imagination sprint. You realize that maps like this were once common among traders who wanted to cloak their real knowledge in riddles. Some historians argue that these maps were more storytelling than cartography, meant to impress or intimidate competitors. Meanwhile, you pocket a small, jagged stone, found at the edge of the path, and wonder whether it's just a rock or a key to understanding the mysteries ahead. A reminder that in the desert, everything ordinary might conceal the extraordinary. You set off alongside the trader, your camel moving lazily, the sun low and orange now, casting shadows that stretch like yawning monsters across the sand. You feel every grain in your shoes, every gust against your face, and sense the beginnings of a rhythm. The desert's pulse, slow and relentless. A lone vulture circles above, probably unimpressed by human ambition, but you wink at it anyway. There's a historical fact tucked in the folds of your mind. Ancient Arabian caravans transported not just goods, but knowledge, carrying manuscripts and poetry across the sands, sometimes more valuable than gold itself. Fringe scholars whisper that some traders even used mirrors to communicate across vast dunes, reflecting signals invisible to anyone not in the know. You're not sure whether to be skeptical or awed, but either way, your curiosity carries you forward, deeper into the golden expanse. As night begins to seep in, you notice the first stars prick the darkening sky. The desert shifts, cooler now, softer underfoot, almost inviting. You think of the dangers that await, the hidden sinkholes, the mirages, and maybe even the map's own cunning. Historians still argue whether the map you carry is literal or metaphorical, whether the treasures it promises exist, or if the journey itself is the reward. You feel the weight of both the map and your own expectations pressing gently against your chest, like a camel's calm nudge. And so, you continue, stepping into the story that has no pause button, where every grain of sand might hide a clue, a trap, or a whisper of forgotten legend. You inhale, exhale, and let the desert fold around you, knowing full well you're now a part of it, as much as it is a part of you. You wander through the market of 1,000 spices, a chaos of colours, scents, and bargaining voices that rise and fall like waves. The sun filters through swaying canvas awnings, dust motes dancing lazily in golden shafts of light, and every stall seems to compete for your attention. You probably think you know what a bazaar smells like. Cumin, cinnamon, dried rose petals, but here, every scent layers atop another, forming a haze that tickles your nose and makes your head spin ever so slightly. A merchant waves you over, voice smooth and persuasive, offering saffron so deep a red it almost seems unreal, claiming it comes from the very sands you've just crossed. You squint at the price and wonder if he's serious or if this is just part of the show. Historians still argue whether medieval traders actually travelled with such rare spices, or whether merchants exaggerated to impress passing travellers. You weave between stalls, toes brushing against small clay pots and baskets of dried fruits. An old man gestures for you to try a sticky date, dusted with powdered sugar, while his neighbour insists you examine jars of burnt sand that allegedly ward off desert spirits. You raise an eyebrow, recalling a fringe tidbit you once read. Some traders were rumoured to carry tiny charms made of camel teeth or scorpion's tails, believed to bring fortune or misfortune depending on which way the wind blew. You tuck a handful of shiny coins into your pocket, feeling the weight of possibility in your palm. You haggle, smile, and almost feel like a part of this chaotic ecosystem, yet your eyes keep darting to a rolled-up parchment tucked behind a pile of folded silks, a map that glimmers faintly, almost winking at you. The trader notices your attention and leans in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "This isn't just a map," he says, tapping the corner of the parchment. "It will lead you to fire." You blink, half expecting a joke, but there's a seriousness in his gaze that makes your skin prickle. You consider how many times in history such promises were mere theatrics. Caravans often carried maps with misleading symbols to throw off rivals. But there's something compelling here, a sense of adventure that curls into your chest like heat in the desert at midday. Fringe scholars suggest that some maps of this sort were even designed to communicate secret codes, using symbols that only certain travellers could interpret. You feel both nervous and excited, fingers itching to unroll the parchment and trace the paths before you. As you meander deeper into the market, you notice small, unexpected details. A child expertly spinning a hoop while balancing a tiny knife, a cat lounging on a pile of dates with the air of a royal observer, and the faint crackle of music coming from a nearby corner where a group plays oud and percussion. Every sound, every movement adds to the dizzying tapestry of life here. You can almost smell the sweat of the camels tethered outside the market gates, mingling with the sweet scent of honey and crushed herbs. It strikes you that medieval traders probably experienced something similar, travelling from oasis to city, carrying goods and stories alike. Some fringe historians even argue that markets like these were early centres for gossip and intelligence, places where political schemes and trade secrets mingled freely among sacks of grain and spices. Your gaze returns to the map, now partially hidden under the merchant's cloak, shimmering subtly in the sunlight. You feel the magnetic pull of its mystery, almost like it knows you're ready to follow. The market itself seems to lean in, aware of your curiosity. You weave past stalls selling hand-woven carpets that ripple like water, jars of preserved lemons, and silver lamps whose surfaces seem to whisper secrets if you hold them just so. You pause to inhale the aroma of roasted coffee beans and dried figs, thinking of how some caravans carried their own little worlds across deserts, a mixture of practicality, survival, and indulgence. Historians still argue whether these trading hubs truly represented the cultures of distant lands, or if they were performances meant to impress newcomers, a theatre of commerce. By the time you leave the market of 1,000 spices, sun dipping low and shadows stretching long across the sand, you are lighter in coin, but heavier in anticipation. You tuck the shimmering map carefully into your satchel, feeling it pulse faintly as if aware of the journey to come. You've tasted the chaos, inhaled the dust and spice, and caught a glimpse of secrets too tempting to ignore. Somewhere between the scent of saffron and the laughter of a young boy tossing coins into a fountain, you realize that the desert is already calling, its dunes whispering promises of fire, treasure, and trials that will stretch both your courage and your imagination. Behind heavy velvet curtains, in a shadowed corner of the market that seems almost suspended out of time, the merchant leans closer, eyes glinting like shards of obsidian. You notice the faint smell of incense, mingling oddly with the earthy scent of sand that clings to your boots. The bustle of the bazaar fades to a dull hum, as if someone pulled a cord and muffled the world outside. He spreads the map across a small table, the glow from an oil lamp catching the delicate lines, revealing strange symbols that curve and twist like serpents. You trace them with your fingers, and already your imagination races. Hidden oases, blazing landmarks, dangerous passes that might swallow a camel whole. Historians still argue whether maps of this period were designed more for navigation or for storytelling, a way to encode allegories about power and wealth into symbols. The merchant speaks, voice soft but urgent. This map isn't just a guide, it's a test. Fire waits for those who follow, but only those clever enough to survive the desert's tricks will reach it. You lean in, skeptical yet strangely compelled. You remember reading fringe accounts that some traders performed rituals before handing over such maps, pouring water over their feet, whispering incantations, or drawing symbols in the sand to ward off envy and misfortune. Could this merchant be part of such a tradition, or is it mere showmanship? Either way, the air seems charged with expectation, your pulse sinking to a rhythm older than any city you've ever known. He slides a small, ornate dagger across the table, not for you to wield, he clarifies, but as a demonstration of the desert's duality. Protection, he says, tapping the handle, and respect. Historians still argue whether these blades were purely practical or ritualistic, symbols of authority as much as tools for survival. You can't help but smirk at the thought of needing a dagger just to negotiate with sand and sun. But his gaze is serious, making your smile fade. Fringe scholars suggest some of these daggers were believed to cut through lies, a notion that seems absurd until you consider how often deception travelled faster than truth along desert trade routes. As he unrolls another corner of the map, you notice intricate pictograms you hadn't seen before, tiny flames, coiled serpents, and clusters of dots. He explains, almost cryptically, that these are markers, hints toward survival, warning, and opportunity. You imagine the caravan leaders of old, huddled around similar maps, tracing routes with their fingers, arguing whether a mirage was just thirst or a clue to hidden water. Some historians still debate whether these symbols had standardized meanings or were personal codes, understood only by the map maker and intended recipient. Fringe interpretations even suggest that certain symbols corresponded to celestial bodies, aligning with constellations to guide travellers at night. You feel a shiver of awe and trepidation, wondering how much of the map is geography and how much is a puzzle meant to challenge your mind as much as your body. The merchant leans back, allowing a moment for the weight of the revelation to settle. Most who see the map think they understand it, he says, voice lowering almost to a whisper. But fire is not found on paths alone. It waits for those who read between the lines. You glance at the dagger again, then the map, your mind buzzing with possibilities. A stray thought crosses your mind. Maybe fire is literal, a blazing landmark, or maybe it's metaphorical, a trial, a test of cunning and courage. Scholars still argue whether fire maps ever led to tangible treasure or were allegories, stories spun to embolden travellers. The fringe theory that the map itself might be alive, its symbols shifting when no one is looking, makes you raise an eyebrow. But somehow, you feel that's exactly the kind of story you're in the mood to believe tonight. You leave the shadowed stall with a renewed sense of purpose, the map rolled and tucked safely into your satchel. Outside, the market's chaos has resumed, a living organism of bartering, haggling, and laughter. But you feel separated, as if stepping through an invisible threshold. You take a deep breath, inhaling spice, dust, and possibility, realizing that every choice from this moment forward will test not only your senses, but your imagination. The merchant's final words echo in your mind. Remember, the desert rewards patience, cunning, and a willingness to see the invisible. You glance at your camel, adjusting the reins, and start walking, knowing that the dunes ahead are no longer just sand. They are riddles, challenges, and the first whispers of a journey that might just redefine how you understand fire, maps, and the desert itself. The desert dunes stretch before you like frozen waves, their golden crests catching the late afternoon sun, shadows pooling in the valleys between them. You trudge along, sand sucking at your boots, grain by grain, as if the desert itself resents every forward step. The heat radiates off the slopes, shimmering in wavering lines that play tricks on your eyes, forming mirages of palaces, caravans, and even distant fires that vanish when you approach. You wipe sweat from your brow and mutter a sleepy joke about how even the sand seems to be judging your hiking skills. Historians still argue whether these shifting dunes really moved as fast as contemporary travellers claimed, or whether exaggeration was simply part of the storytelling culture of desert expeditions. The map glimmers faintly in your satchel, an almost imperceptible warmth emanating from the parchment. You pause to trace its lines, noticing that some paths seem to shift subtly as the sunlight strikes them, a reminder that the desert is never static. Fringe scholars have suggested that certain ancient desert maps incorporated optical illusions or encoded wind patterns, a method for predicting sand shifts or hidden wells. You shake your head, half laughing at the thought of maps changing while no one's watching, but the notion gnaws at your curiosity. Every step you take feels heavier, each grain of sand whispering secrets about centuries of travellers who once followed these very lines. Night creeps slowly across the dunes, and with it comes a surprising drop in temperature. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and burnt oranges. You notice nocturnal creatures stirring, the soft padding of a fox, the sudden flutter of a bat, and the distant calls of desert owls. You kick sand over your footprints, mindful of traditions that say leaving a perfect trail invites misfortune. Historical records suggest that traders often carried animals not just for utility, but as companions against isolation, perhaps a subconscious way to keep the mind engaged in a desert that can stretch both body and soul to its limits. Fringe tales tell of sand cats that supposedly guided lost travellers to water, though skeptics insist such stories were purely allegorical. As darkness deepens, the dunes transform. What felt like a golden sea in daylight now becomes an undulating ocean of obsidian and silver. Under the first sprinkling of stars, the wind carries both chill and whisper, tiny, almost inaudible, as if the desert itself is commenting on your progress. You find yourself imagining those early traders who crossed these sands under similar skies, perhaps reading the same constellations to navigate. Their only company the lowing of camels and the distant cry of a desert jackal. Historians still debate how reliable these stars were as guides, given the shifting sands and mirages that plagued even the most experienced navigator. A small sand lizard darts across your path, pausing briefly as if inspecting your shoes before disappearing into a dune. You chuckle, thinking about fringe theories that certain desert creatures were considered spiritual guardians, messengers from the dunes themselves. You trudge onward, boots sinking with every step, each hill cresting with new possibilities, hidden wells, long-lost caravan routes, maybe even the first hints of that fiery landmark promised by the map. The air grows cooler now, scents of desert herbs faintly rising from hidden crevices. You pause, crouching to inhale deeply, feeling both fatigue and a strange exhilaration. This is the desert in its truest form, beautiful, merciless, and whispering secrets just beyond comprehension. Ahead, the dunes curve sharply, forming a small valley where you decide to camp. You spread your blanket on the sand, noting that some medieval travellers carried portable shelters made of reeds or cloth, ingenious for heat by day and insulation at night. Fringe records speak of temporary campsites marked by stones or carvings, meant to confuse competitors or protect secrets, a reminder that even rest in the desert was never entirely simple. You build a small fire, the scent of smoke mingling with the faint warm aroma of sand and distant flora. Sitting cross-legged, you glance at the horizon, feeling the first stars wink through the twilight, and realize that every dune, every shadow, every whispering grain has already become part of your story. Night settles over your camp like a soft, sable blanket, stars pricking the dark sky with quiet intensity, and you feel a curious calm settling into your bones. Around your crackling fire, fellow travellers, some human, some camel, and maybe even a stray desert fox, gather, sharing tales that seem to stretch as far and deep as the dunes themselves. You lean back, feeling the warmth of the flames against the chill creeping from the sand, listening to stories so vivid they almost make you question what is real and what is legend. One merchant speaks of ghostly caravans that appear and vanish, their lanterns floating like lost stars across the sand. Fringe accounts suggest that travellers once mistook desert heat mirages for spectral visions, but the chill of night and the hushed tone of the storyteller make the tale oddly convincing. A rhythmic tapping begins somewhere near your camp, and you realize a young boy is drumming on a hollowed gourd, his fingers a blur, keeping time with the fire's crackle. You can't help but smile at the juxtaposition, centuries of survival stories intertwined with a spontaneous percussion performance. You ask him why, and he simply shrugs, saying, "The desert likes music at night, it listens." Historians still argue whether music and storytelling were survival strategies in desert caravans, a way to stay alert and morale high, or if they were purely cultural embellishments. Fringe theorists go further, suggesting that certain rhythms could actually mask the presence of travellers, confusing predators and rival caravans alike. You chuckle, imagining yourself stealthily drumming your way past sandvipers, and shake your head at the absurdity. The tales grow darker, yet not unpleasantly so. An elderly trader recounts how a caravan once carried an entire library across the dunes, parchment and ink surviving winds that could strip flesh from bone. You imagine scrolls rolling with the camels, preserved in layers of cloth and sand, their knowledge travelling centuries before the ink faded. Historians still debate whether such feats of transport were common or miraculous exceptions, and whether we should marvel at human ingenuity or at the sheer audacity of trusting fragile parchment to desert whims. Fringe whispers tell of book spirits, guardian entities said to protect precious manuscripts, emerging as flickering shadows when the sand shifted. You glance into the darkness, half expecting a shimmering figure to appear, and tell yourself it's probably just your imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, it isn't. Somewhere between sips of lukewarm tea and the scent of roasted dates, the conversation drifts to survival tricks. A young woman demonstrates a method to extract water from cactus thorns without piercing your palm, while a grizzled merchant recounts the use of camel dung as a sunscreen, a historical fact that makes you scrunch your nose and laugh quietly to avoid waking anyone. Fringe scholars debate whether these methods were widespread or exaggerated in storytelling, but either way, you tuck the mental notes away, thinking they might come in handy when the dunes grow harsh again. You realise that each anecdote, no matter how strange or humorous, carries an undercurrent of genuine wisdom, a mixture of practicality and legend forged through centuries of trial. As the fire dies down to embers, the group falls into a hush, and you feel the desert stretching itself around you, patient and immense. The stories linger in your mind like smoke, curling and twisting, refusing to settle completely. One last tale reaches your ears, a story of a hidden oasis that appears only under the moon's first glow, its waters reflecting the stars so perfectly that travellers have drowned trying to navigate its beauty. Historians still argue whether such oases were real or allegorical, a teaching story about desire and hubris, while fringe sources hint at the existence of temporary water pools left by underground springs, a secret known only to the most experienced wanderers. You tuck the map closer to your chest, feeling a subtle warmth, and drift to sleep under the stars, the desert whispering lullabies of fire, fortune, and far-off mysteries. The map rests on your lap as you wake, still faintly warm from the night, as though it sensed your dreams and wanted to guide them. Moonlight bathes the dunes in a silver sheen, highlighting patterns in the sand that your tired eyes interpret as trails, ancient and shifting, worn by centuries of wandering feet. You trace the first clue on the map, noticing a symbol resembling a coiled flame near a crescent-shaped dune. The trader had hinted it pointed toward a hidden oasis, and your curiosity spikes, mingled with a twinge of anxiety. Fringe scholars argue that some of these symbols predate written history, suggesting a lineage of knowledge older than the civilizations we usually credit with cartography. You tug your scarf tighter against the cool night breeze, feeling the pulse of anticipation in every joint and muscle. As you begin your trek toward the symbol, the air feels charged with something you can't quite name, a mixture of expectation, the faint scent of distant water, and something almost electrical, like the desert itself is holding its breath. You notice tiny markings in the sand, a sequence of footprints that abruptly vanish, hinting at hidden crevices or shifting dunes. You bend to examine them, realizing some desert guides may have left subtle signs for the worthy and attentive. Historians still debate whether ancient travelers really relied on such cues, or whether the tracks were simply natural phenomena interpreted as guidance. Fringe tales tell of desert spirits nudging travelers towards safety or treasure. But you remind yourself that not all legends are literal. Sometimes they're just a poetic way to describe observation and intuition. Your pace slows as you near the crescent-shaped dune, and you catch your first glimpse of the oasis. Moonlight reflects off water so still it seems unreal, almost like a portal. A light wind stirs the fronds of date palms, carrying whispers of stories centuries old. You crouch at the water's edge, dipping your hands and marvelling at the cool contrast to the desert's lingering warmth. You think of the caravans that might have crossed these sands, their survival dependent on hidden oases like this one. Fringe scholars speculate that some of these sites were deliberately concealed, creating a web of secrecy among trading networks, while historians argue over whether they were naturally occurring or subtly engineered. Either way, the water's presence feels miraculous, and you take a long, reverent drink. As you explore the oasis, you notice carvings on nearby stones, symbols etched in faint relief that correspond eerily with the markings on your map. The realization makes your pulse quicken. The map's first clue is more than geographical. It's a puzzle, a test of perception and patience. You run your fingers over the stone, feeling grooves shaped by time and sand, thinking about how early travellers might have deciphered such markers, or if some were designed solely to challenge outsiders. Fringe theories even suggest that these symbols could align with constellations, offering celestial guidance at night. You glance upward, connecting the stars above with the carvings below, and feel a small thrill of discovery. A small lizard scuttles along a rock, unbothered by your presence, and you can't help but smile at its casual confidence. In this quiet corner of the desert, the map seems to hum faintly, urging you forward while hinting at secrets still beyond reach. You sit for a moment, letting the night air cool your skin and the moonlight illuminate the fine sand between the palms. Historians still argue whether travellers relied more on instinct, oral traditions, or actual maps to navigate such hidden sites, and you realise that perhaps the truth is a blend of all three. Fringe tales of water nymphs or guardian spirits seem less absurd now, and you tuck the map carefully back into your satchel, ready to follow its next clue into whatever challenges the desert has prepared. Without warning, the desert shifts. A sandstorm rises on the horizon, the first whispering gusts quickly swelling into a wall of wind and grit. You squint through the haze, the sun already a diffused orange blur behind the churning sand. Your first instinct is to seek shelter, heart racing as grains whip against your skin and sting your eyes. You pull your scarf tighter around your face, thinking of all the survival tricks you've read or imagined, some practical, others bordering on absurd. Fringe sources claim some travellers once used folded metal sheets to channel wind into a small, breathable tunnel, a technique modern adventurers might scoff at. You can almost see it working, if only in the half-dreaming, adrenaline-fueled logic of a storm's chaos. The dunes now feel like shifting giants, their peaks crested with swirling sand, ready to topple at any misstep. You duck behind a small ridge, pressing your back against the warm rock, and feel the storm's intensity pulse through the ground. Historians still argue about medieval desert routes, whether travellers preferred night marches to avoid heat or risked sudden storms during the day. The contrast of calm rock and relentless sand reminds you why the desert was both feared and revered. You catch a glimpse of your camel, its eyes blinking through the storm, seemingly unfazed, a steadfast companion amidst chaos. You mutter a joke about your own less than calm demeanour, earning a chuckle even from the desert itself, if deserts could laugh. Hidden flora becomes your unexpected saviour, a cluster of resilient desert plants, their waxy leaves curled tightly, offers slight protection from the abrasive wind. You crouch low, pressing against their roots and feeling a strange, grounding connection. Some fringe accounts suggest that ancient travellers memorised plant formations to predict storm paths, using subtle environmental cues as survival guides. It makes you appreciate how early desert guides might have been less reliant on maps than on observation, a skill you realise you're slowly cultivating. The sand, relentless though it is, begins to shift your perspective. Survival isn't just about moving forward, it's about reading the environment in whispers rather than commands. The storm forces you to pause and observe. Tiny creatures emerge from burrows, scuttling through the sand with surprising agility, reminding you of historical accounts of nocturnal desert life. Some scholars debate whether early traders actively hunted or observed these creatures for survival insights, while fringe theories claim certain species guided travellers toward water or hidden caches of goods. A sand-coloured lizard darts across your line of sight, pausing as if to make sure you're paying attention, before disappearing beneath a dune. You smile, half expecting it to have a secret message or at least a smug sense of desert superiority. Time becomes distorted in the storm. Minutes stretch and contract as you feel both disoriented and oddly alert, every nerve humming. The map in your satchel seems to react to the environment, edges curling slightly as if alive, almost guiding your hands toward the right path. Historians still argue whether such maps were literal tools or coded storytelling devices meant to impart survival wisdom through allegory. Fringe theorists would call the map semi-sentient, reacting to intent or need, an idea that makes you laugh softly while acknowledging a creeping sense of wonder. The storm passes as suddenly as it arrived, leaving the dunes glistening under the late afternoon sun, pristine and eerie. You rise, brushing sand from your clothes, and realize the desert has tested you, teaching patience, observation, and humility in the space of a single, violent hour. By the time you continue walking, the dunes are calm, but the lesson lingers. You feel more attuned to the desert's whispers, noticing subtle shifts in sand, scent, and light. The oasis you seek is still ahead, hinted at faintly by the map's glowing symbols. You trudge forward with renewed focus, each step a meditation, each breath a measure of endurance and awareness. Somewhere in the quiet aftermath, you understand the desert's duality, a harsh, unyielding force and a teacher, patient and ancient, rewarding only those willing to listen closely. The oasis of echoes appears like a mirage at first, a glimmering cluster of palms and water that seems almost too perfect to be real. You pause at the edge, letting the sight sink in, and for a moment, the desert's heat, sand, and storms all fade behind the serene silver-blue reflection of the lagoon. A soft wind carries whispers of ancient traders, their voices mingling with the rustle of palm fronds, and you swear you can hear laughter and haggling long past. Fringe tales claim these oases echoed the sounds of all who visited before, a natural phenomenon amplified by clever rock formations. Historians still argue whether such acoustic tricks were deliberate or simply a happy accident of the landscape. You step carefully toward the water, feeling the cool, damp sand under your feet, a relief after the endless arid stretches. Tiny fish dart in the shallows, their scales shimmering like liquid starlight. You cup your hands, dipping into the oasis to drink, the water sweet and almost perfect. The map glows faintly again, confirming you've reached the first checkpoint. You trace the edges of the lagoon with your eyes, noticing carvings on the palm trunks and nearby stones, ancient symbols that mirror those on your map. Fringe scholars suggest these carvings might predate the civilizations typically credited with the desert's earlier settlements, hinting at a knowledge lineage lost to time. As you explore the oasis, the air seems alive with a hum, almost like a low musical note vibrating from the stones themselves. Tiny crickets and nocturnal insects add to the soundscape, creating a surreal symphony. You sit beneath a palm, feeling the leaves brush lightly against your face, thinking about the traders who may have once rested here. Historical records note that oasis camps were vital nodes in desert trade routes, providing water, shelter, and rare herbs that were traded at great value. Fringe sources argue that some oasis locations were intentionally concealed, marked only by subtle cues in the environment, like shifting stones, unusual plants, or sound patterns, to prevent outsiders from discovering them. You notice reflections in the water, shadows that seem to twist and stretch unnaturally, echoing figures you might have imagined at the bazaar or along the dunes. The map hints at a small grove on the oasis's far side, where a hidden spring may lie. You follow the path, careful not to disturb the delicate flora. Bright flowers, unusual for the harsh desert environment, sway in the breeze, releasing a subtle fragrance. You pause to collect a sample, noting how some plants were historically used for medicinal purposes or even as natural preservatives for food and water. Historians still argue how much of this knowledge was shared openly among traders versus kept secret as a competitive advantage. As night falls, the oasis transforms into a tranquil haven. Moonlight glimmers on the water, casting silver streaks across the sand, and you feel an almost sacred hush in the air. The soft sounds of the desert, whispering palms, distant insects, and the gentle lapping of water blend with your own heartbeat, creating a meditative rhythm. Fringe accounts suggest that some oases were considered spiritual refuges, places where travellers could commune with the desert's essence before continuing their journey. You take a deep breath, feeling a sense of timeless serenity, yet also a lingering tension. The map has more to reveal, more tests to impose, and you are ready to follow its fiery clues deeper into the desert's secrets. As you leave the oasis behind, the desert stretches out like a silent, golden ocean, endless and patient. The map in your satchel pulses faintly, almost as if nudging you forward, and your eyes catch movement, a creature, small and lithe, darting between dunes. Its coat shimmers in the sun, sandy with flecks of gold, blending seamlessly with the terrain. You stop and watch, amazed at its agility, noting how it pauses occasionally to peer at you, as if sizing up your intentions. Historians still argue whether rare desert animals like this influence local legends, with some suggesting that the fleeting glimpses of such creatures became the basis for myths about fire guardians. Fringe accounts go further, claiming these beings could lead or mislead travellers depending on their intentions, a mystical guide woven into the fabric of the dunes. You crouch, careful not to disturb the creature, and notice faint tracks in the sand, tiny, precise, almost deliberate. It seems to circle back occasionally, waiting to see if you're observant enough to follow. You can't help but smile at its apparent cunning. Medieval traders often noted animal behaviour to predict water sources or impending sandstorms, and some fringe historians even suggest that certain animals were trained or habituated to guide caravans. You mimic the creature's cautious movements, realizing that the desert is teaching you subtle lessons, observation, patience, and respect for life that moves differently than you. The map directs you toward a cluster of jagged rocks, faint symbols glowing against its parchment. You feel a thrill as the creature leads the way for a few paces, then vanishes into a dune, leaving you with a sense of both companionship and mystery. You move cautiously, aware that the desert is full of hidden perils, from sudden drop-offs to scorpion nests camouflaged beneath loose sand. Fringe sources tell of travellers following desert creatures for days, believing them to be enchanted or divinely guided. While historians still debate whether these were genuine survival tactics or tales embroidered over time, the heat radiates off the rocks as you climb carefully, each step testing your balance. You notice faint carvings etched into the stone, symbols that correspond to the map's fiery indicators. You pause, feeling the wind whip against your face, sand flicking across your arms, and reflect on how medieval travellers relied on such markers to navigate harsh landscapes. Some fringe scholars even speculate that these carvings emitted a faint luminescence at night, guiding only the initiated through treacherous terrain. You chuckle softly at the thought, imagining the desert glowing with hidden fire markers while everyone else wandered blindly. By midday, the desert stretches into a vast plateau, and you spot another hint of movement in the distance, a faint shimmer, almost mirage-like, accompanied by a shadowy outline that could be another desert creature, or perhaps a human observer. The map glows warmer now, urging you forward, and you feel a mixture of exhilaration and caution. Historians still argue whether sightings of mysterious desert animals were misidentifications of common wildlife or inspired entirely new myths. Fringe tales speak of creatures that could vanish and reappear at will, guardians of the hidden paths the map leads you along. You breathe deeply, feeling a sense of camaraderie with both the living and legendary guides of the dunes, and continue onward, each step echoing through the desert's endless, golden halls. You crest a ridge, and the land opens into a strange, shimmering basin. The ground here is darker, almost glassy, and your sandals crunch faintly as though you're walking over brittle shards. You kneel, brushing away sand, and realize it's vitrified stone, rock melted into glass by ancient, searing heat. Historians still argue whether these patches came from meteor strikes, volcanic activity, or, as fringe accounts claim, forgotten experiments in desert alchemy. Whatever the truth, the place feels charged, as if the air itself hums with leftover fire. The map glows warmly in your satchel, its fiery veins responding to the terrain. When you pull it free, the symbols blaze brighter, pointing toward a spiral of cracked stone at the basin's centre. You step carefully, your reflection fractured in every direction by jagged black glass. The heat here is intense, but not from the sun alone. Some buried memory of flame seems to radiate upward. You joke to yourself that it feels like standing on the desert stovetop, and immediately regret the thought when your sandals squeak like sizzling oil. At the spiral's heart, you find a shallow depression where fire once pooled like liquid. Fringe writers claim alchemists tried to trap elemental fire in vessels here, creating maps and tools imbued with its essence. Mainstream historians prefer a less mystical explanation, that traders gathered black glass as raw material for blades or ornaments. Still, the arrangement of the stones, spiraled and deliberate, suggests human hands shaped the site. You crouch, tracing one edge, wondering if ancient rituals took place under starlight, flames contained in bowls of glass, desert winds carrying prayers skyward. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretch across the basin, and you hear faint echoes, like distant chanting. Your rational side knows sound carries strangely in hollow rock formations, but another part of you leans into the mystery, imagining ancient voices still circling here. You drop a pebble into the central depression, and the echo reverberates longer than expected, as if the ground holds memory. Historians still argue whether sites like this were ceremonial or purely practical, and your mind drifts between both possibilities, ritual and utility blending into one. The creature from earlier flashes at the basin's edge, watching silently before disappearing again, as though ensuring you don't stray. You laugh quietly, admitting that even with a fiery map in hand, you're grateful for any extra guidance, mystical or not. The desert has a way of humbling you, offering hints but never clear answers, demanding both trust and endurance. You sit for a while at the spiral's centre, letting the air's heat wash over you. Stars prick the sky earlier than expected, their light mirrored in shards of black glass until it looks as though the night itself has pooled around your feet. The fire map pulses again, symbols shifting subtly, leading you onward. You rise, brushing off your robes, feeling like you've just walked through the desert's furnace and come out tempered, tested, but not broken. With a steady breath, you leave the basin, steps echoing against vitrified stone, carrying the memory of fire with you into the deepening night. The desert at night is not quiet, it's alive. You hear the shuffle of small paws in the sand, wings rustling in the cool air, and the low hiss of the wind threading through rocks like a cautious storyteller. You tighten your cloak against the chill, surprised at how quickly the day's furnace has flipped into a cold vastness. Historians still argue whether medieval travellers exaggerated these swings in temperature to dramatise their journeys. But anyone who has felt the desert's bite at midnight knows the truth. It's no exaggeration at all. The map glows steadily, fiery veins illuminating your path as though lit by embers hidden beneath parchment. Ahead, you spot flickering lights that seem to dance just above the horizon. At first you dismiss them as mirages, heat's cruel trick lingering even in the night, but then you realise they shift with rhythm, rising and falling like a distant campfire chorus. Fringe accounts tell of phantom camps, spectral caravans that appear to the weary, luring them off course. Mainstream historians chalk it up to bioluminescent insects or tricks of atmospheric refraction, but out here, where each grain of sand feels older than memory, you're not so quick to dismiss the supernatural. You decide to follow the lights, cautious but curious. The sand crunches underfoot, crisp in the night chill. A sudden gust sweeps across the dunes, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. You joke to yourself about desert takeout arriving late, but the humour doesn't erase the prickling sensation along your spine. Soon, you reach a low hollow shielded by jagged rocks. There, at its centre, stands a circle of fire pits, glowing faintly though no one tends them. You step closer, brushing your hand above the warmth. They're hot, undeniably alive. Etched around the pits are carvings matching your map's fiery motifs, spirals and branching lines reminiscent of both flames and rivers. Historians still argue whether such symbols were universal or unique to secretive desert guilds. Fringe voices insist they were instructions, coded maps designed to be read by firelight alone, invisible by day. You kneel, holding your map over the pits, and to your amazement, the parchment shifts. The fiery veins align with the carvings, revealing new paths glowing towards the east. A sudden rustle makes you spin. Shadows flicker across the rocks, tall and wavering, though no figures stand there. You whisper something half joking. Maybe it's just the fire making shapes like a celestial puppet show. But your voice comes out a little too thin to convince even yourself. The desert at night has its own script, and you're playing a role you don't entirely understand. You rest by one of the warm pits, sipping water while watching the sky wheel above. The stars here are sharp, unblinking, so clear you almost feel you could fall upward into them. Fringe sources claim certain desert groups aligned fire pits with constellations, believing they mirrored heavens on earth. Historians still debate whether that was navigation, ritual, or both. You find yourself tracing those lines, matching stars to pits, feeling suddenly small yet included in some vast design. Eventually the fire pits dim, as if satisfied you've absorbed their lesson. The path on your map remains lit, urging you forward. You stand, stretching sore legs, and whisper thanks to the empty night. Humour helps soften the unease. You mutter that it would be nice if the desert also provided a pillow and mattress, but deep down you know the gift is in the direction itself. With the map pulsing gently in your hands and the dunes glowing faintly silver under starlight, you continue east, following the fiery trail into the heart of the unknown. The dunes rise higher now, sharper, like frozen waves in a golden sea. You climb steadily, sand slipping under your boots, calves burning as you pull yourself upward. At the ridge, you pause, and your breath catches. Below stretches a vast canyon, hidden from the flat world above. Its walls are streaked with crimson and black, as if scorched by some ancient inferno. Historians still argue whether these formations were shaped solely by wind and erosion, or whether fire, natural or otherwise, played a role in carving such dramatic scars. The map pulses with more intensity here, its fiery veins bright enough to light your face. You descend cautiously into the canyon, each step echoing against stone walls. The air is warmer than it should be, a faint mineral tang hanging on your tongue. Fringe sources whisper of fire rivers once flowing through such canyons, molten streams hidden beneath the earth, worshipped by those who believed the desert itself had veins of flame. You laugh softly at the thought of desert plumbing powered by lava, but as the heat radiates from the rock, the idea feels less far-fetched. At the canyon's base, you discover a narrow trail lined with strange etchings. They spiral upward like flames licking toward the sky, guiding your eyes to a hollow cut into the wall. Inside, you find shards of pottery, blackened as if fire-kissed. Historians still debate whether these were remnants of ritual offerings or simply broken vessels discarded by traders. One fringe theory even suggests they were deliberately sacrificed pots, shattered to release the spirit of the clay back to the desert. You pick one up, running your fingers over the jagged edge, feeling both the history and absurd practicality of breaking your dishware to please unseen forces. Moving deeper, the canyon narrows, walls pressing close until you can touch both sides at once. The ground glows faintly, patches of phosphorescent mineral twinkling under your steps. You recall how medieval travellers sometimes mistook natural luminescence for magical phenomena, recording tales of fiery stones that lit paths at night. Historians still argue whether these accounts exaggerated reality or described rare geological features. Here, though, with glowing rock underfoot, you understand how easily awe could be mistaken for enchantment. A sudden echo startles you, footsteps that aren't your own. You freeze, listening. The sound repeats, deliberate, paced. You call out, half serious, half nervous, joking that if it's another enchanted desert lizard, you'd at least appreciate a little wave. Silence answers. Then, from around a bend, a figure flickers, just for a moment, in firelight hues. You blink, and it's gone, leaving only the faint scent of smoke. Fringe accounts describe flame keepers, spectral guardians who appear when maps like yours are in use. Historians, predictably, dismiss such tales as hallucinations caused by fatigue. You rub your eyes, muttering that hallucinations usually don't come with such specific cologne. As you press on, the canyon opens suddenly into a vast chamber beneath the stars, its floor cracked with glowing lines that match your map's fiery veins. You stand in awe, realizing this is no ordinary landscape but a monumental marker, perhaps even a crossroads. Your map flares brightly, symbols realigning, pointing deeper into the desert. You laugh quietly, equal parts nervous and excited, realizing the fiery path is far from finished. You breathe deeply, committing the sight to memory before continuing onward, carrying both the mystery and the warmth of this hidden canyon with you. The canyon gives way to a barren expanse where the sand feels heavier, darker, as though infused with something more than dust. You trudge forward, each step crunching faintly as if the grains themselves are glassy fragments. Your map glows brighter here, fiery veins pulsing in rhythm with your own heartbeat, guiding you toward a formation rising on the horizon, a spire of stone crowned with blackened edges, like a candle burnt nearly to its end. Historians still argue whether such monoliths were natural outcrops or deliberately shaped by ancient hands. Fringe theories claim they were desert lighthouses, aligned with fire rituals to signal caravans across vast distances. As you approach, the spire hums faintly, a vibration you can feel through your soles. You circle its base, noticing inscriptions carved deep into the rock, weathered but still legible in the firelight glow of your map. They tell of traders who sought a map of fire to guide them through storms and shifting sands, a relic said to burn only in the hands of the worthy. You smirk at the idea of being worthy, brushing grit off your sweat-stained robes, muttering that if surviving endless sand counts, then yes, you are at least partially qualified. A stair-like path winds around the spire and you climb, hands brushing against its warm surface. Halfway up, you discover alcoves cut into the rock, each containing remnants of offerings, scorched coins, beads melted into lumps, even a sandal fused into hardened glass. Historians still debate whether such deposits were practical sacrifices or symbolic gestures, left to appease the desert's unpredictable forces. Fringe accounts suggest the spire acted as a testing ground, demanding gifts of fire to unlock its secrets. You pause at one alcove, joking that if the spire wants a melted snack bar, you're out of luck. At the summit, the view stuns you. The desert stretches in every direction, a vast canvas of dunes painted silver by the moon. Yet the spire itself holds your attention. At its peak, a bowl-like hollow cradles charred remains of fires long extinguished. As you approach, the map in your hands burns with light, its symbols aligning perfectly with the hollow's grooves. You lay it down, half afraid, half thrilled. The stone warms beneath your palms, and for an instant, faint flames dance across the bowl, illuminating the air with shifting shadows. You hear whispers, Fragments of languages both familiar and alien. Some sound like haggling traders, others like chants carried from forgotten temples. Historians still argue whether such voices are tricks of wind in hollowed stone or evidence of ritual sites doubling as echo chambers. Fringe believers call them memory flames, voices burned into the rock, released only when fire is rekindled. You sit, shivering despite the heat, feeling both watched and welcomed. When the light fades, your map glows steady, not pulsing but calm, as though reassured. It now points to a jagged horizon further east. You descend the spire, legs trembling slightly, wondering if the desert is stripping away your doubts step by step, reshaping you as surely as wind reshapes dunes. You mutter a sleepy joke. If the next landmark demands another donation, you'll gladly sacrifice your blistered socks, and the desert answers only with silence, endless and watchful. The dunes carry you eastward, their ridges sharper now, jagged as if carved by some immense blade. Each crest you climb feels taller than the last, and every descent sends small avalanches of sand sliding around your ankles. The map in your hands no longer flickers in bursts but glows with a calm, steady flame, as if it trusts you to keep walking. You mutter that the desert must have more faith in you than your own knees do. Far ahead, the jagged horizon takes form, a line of stone teeth rising from the sand, black and angular, like the broken walls of a fortress half swallowed by time. Historians still argue whether such formations were ancient caravan markers, deliberately stacked to guide traders across featureless seas of sand, or whether the desert itself sculpted them into uncanny shapes. Fringe storytellers prefer the more dramatic tale, that these were the shattered gates of a city consumed by fire, its towers melted into glass, leaving only these fangs behind as a warning. The closer you come, the more the air feels heavy, as though charged with unseen fire. Your feet crunch not only on sand but on flecks of something harder. You kneel and sift a handful, black glass, brittle shards that catch the moonlight like obsidian. Scholars note that great lightning strikes can fuse sand into such fragments. Others whisper about ancient rituals of flame so intense they baked the desert floor itself. You let the shards trickle from your fingers and sigh that if the gods were truly hurling lightning bolts here, they had terrible aim. The stone teeth loom overhead now, and between them, a narrow passage beckons. You step closer, tracing your hand along the ridged surface. Symbols appear again, cruder than those on the spire, gouged deep, almost desperate. They depict traders bowing before a rising flame, their goods piled high, their faces hidden in shadow. You guess the message is simple enough. Passage requires sacrifice. Your stomach sinks. You rummage in your pack, half laughing, half serious, a cracked water skin, a bent copper coin, a ragged scrap of cloth you've used as a head wrap. You mutter that if the desert wants your only pair of socks, it's welcome to them. Finally, you press the coin into a shallow groove between the stones. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the map flares brighter, and a low hum passes through the rock, as if the gate itself has sighed in acceptance. A faint glow traces the gap between the teeth, outlining a hidden passage. You step inside, shoulders brushing against warm stone. The corridor is narrow, barely wide enough for your pack, and the air carries a smell like smouldering resin. The map's glow reflects off the walls, catching in veins of glassy black running through the stone, veins that glitter like frozen lightning. Historians still argue whether such corridors were natural fractures or cut deliberately by hands unknown. Fringe tales say they were carved by the desert itself, splitting stone to test the resolve of travellers. At last, the passage opens onto a basin wide and shallow. Here, the ground is paved not with sand but with hexagonal stones, fitted so tightly they resemble the scales of a giant beast. Some are cracked, others scorched, yet the pattern remains whole. Scholars debate whether such geometry was the work of traders marking sacred ground, or whether they were remnants of cities long erased by storms. The fringe claim they are star maps, diagrams of constellations meant to summon the desert's hidden guardians. You step onto the mosaic. The stones are warm beneath your soles, and the air hums faintly again, as though remembering fires long extinguished. At the basin's centre, the map in your hands pulses once, then grows serene, its fiery script aligning with the stone beneath your feet. A soft shimmer outlines a path across the mosaic, glowing eastward. You laugh softly, shaking your head. No confetti, no treasure chest, just another direction in the endless desert. You whisper to the silent night that if the desert wants more sacrifices, it had better start accepting bad jokes as payment. And with that, you follow the glowing path, the stones echoing faintly beneath your steps, as if countless others had once walked this same road. You feel the wind shift, carrying with it a new scent, no longer smoke and burning resin, but cool desert rain that has travelled far to find this place. The sand that once burned beneath your feet now feels lighter, softer, as though the storm has washed away not only the map of fire, but also the fears tied to it. The trader looks at you with tired eyes, yet they are no longer burdened by greed or the heavy chains of desire. He speaks softly, almost as if the desert itself must strain to hear him. A map that burns, a treasure that consumes. It was never gold, never jewels. It was always fire, the fire inside us, the hunger that shapes and unshapes our lives. His words settle in your mind like grains of sand, impossible to separate from the wind of memory. You realize that the map has not vanished. It has merely folded itself into your thoughts, leaving behind only a faint glow, a reminder that the fire of longing can guide or destroy, depending on how you hold it. The dunes begin to shift again, this time not with threat but with promise. They ripple like the surface of a sea, and you sense the endless journey of caravans yet to come, of new traders, new seekers who will walk the same paths beneath the same stars. Perhaps one day, another will stumble upon a glowing ember hidden in the sand, and the tale of the map of fire will be born again. The desert quiets, wrapping you in a calm so deep it feels eternal. Your breathing slows, steady and heavy, as though you are sinking into the folds of time itself. The stars burn above, gentle flames, far more patient than the ones the trader once chased. You let the story close around you like a tent of silk, its edges stitched with wind and starlight. The desert trader fades into the horizon, his figure dissolving into a line where the earth kisses the sky. You're left with silence, with warmth, with the knowledge that even fire can teach rest. Sleep comes to you like a caravan at dusk, steady and certain, carrying you beyond the map of fire and into a night without fear. Good night, traveller of stories. May your dreams burn softly like stars above the desert.